All right, so we've got two more examples left that we're going to work through. And like I said, you might want to use a piece of scratch paper. This space that I've given you here is probably not quite enough space for all the algebra that we're going to need to do. So I've already rewritten the questions on another sheet of paper, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. Now it says we want to find the limit as x is going to negative infinity for x plus the square root of x squared plus 2x. And like we talked about in the previous video, really what's going on here is that we have a function here where if I plug in negative infinity, I have negative infinity plus infinity. And so we need to figure out a way to use some algebra to rewrite this. Now, what I suggested on the previous page under the rewrite section here, so this section right here, is we want to either factor, use the conjugate, or create a common denominator. I'm going to start out using the conjugate of this term. Now, even though we don't have a denominator, I can still multiply by 1, and the conjugate of this term would be x minus the square root of x squared plus 2x over that same thing. And when I multiply that out, I'm left with the limit as x is going to negative infinity. And hopefully you've seen throughout all these questions now that I'm keeping that limit notation until I actually evaluate it. You want to make sure that you are doing that because until you evaluate the limit, this should be there. Don't forget what the limit's going to. Don't forget the limit notation. Keep that there. So on the bottom I have x minus the square root of x squared plus 2x. And then here on the top I'm left with x squared minus x squared plus 2. And we have some simplifying. We can see that these x squareds are going to cancel out and I'm left with negative 2x on top. So I have the limit as x is going to negative infinity, and on top I have negative 2x, and on bottom I have x minus the square root of x squared plus 2x. Now this looks more like the problems we were doing in this section before, where we're going to use that trick of multiplying by 1. And the degree of the bottom, well, here we just have x, and the square root of x squared is also x. So what we're going to be multiplying by is 1 over x. Now, we're going to negative infinity, and we want to be careful here. On the top, 1 over x, that's going to be negative because that's going to negative infinity. But inside this radical, when we square negative infinity, it becomes positive. So what we're going to need to do is use that little negative trick here again to account for that negative going away. Right, so on the top I have negative 2x over x. On the bottom I have x over x minus, and then that negative, and that radical here we've got x squared over x squared plus 2x over x squared. Again, the reason why this extra negative is popping up here, because x squared is positive inside here, but out here x is just negative when we're going to negative infinity. So this negative accounts for that negative going away here. And remember, a negative times a negative becomes a positive. This becomes 1, that becomes 1, 1, and this goes to 0. So what we're left with then is the limit as x goes to negative infinity. On the top we have negative 2. On the bottom we have 1 plus, and then here this is 1 plus 0. Well, the square root of 1 plus 0 is 1, square root of 1 is 1, 1 plus 1 is 2. So negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. Okay. So a lot of little kind of tedious things with that problem. And the next question looks a little bit different. This is an exponential equation now, and there's a couple different ways we're going to rewrite this function. First off, we've got e to the 3x and then e to the negative 3x. And if I were to go to infinity right now, this is going to go to infinity. This is going to be 0. So we'll have 0, or infinity minus 0. And on the bottom, this will go to infinity, and this will go to 0. So we have infinity over infinity, and this is one of those indeterminate forms that we need to rewrite. Now, it is possible to do the rewriting that I'm going to do in one step, but I'm going to do it in 2 steps because I think it's kind of easier for students that this is new to. It's easier for them to see. But it is possible for me to combine these steps here. So first off, I'm going to multiply by e to the 3x. And you might be wondering why I chose that. Well, first off, I'd like for some of these to become constants so that when I divide by e to some power of x, those things will end up going to 0. Now, e to the negative 3x and e to the 3x, when I multiply those, we add those exponents, and negative 3x plus 3x is 0, and anything to the 0 power is just 1. And so that's what told me that this is what I would be multiplying by. Now remember, this gets distributed to both of these, so this becomes the limit as x is going to infinity of e to the 6x minus 1 over e to the 6x plus 1. Now, it's a lot easier for us to see what we're going to multiply by. I'm going to multiply on top and bottom by 1 over e to the 6x, 1 over e to the 6x. And when I do that, my limit's still going to infinity. This becomes e to the 6x over e to the 6x minus 1 over e to the 6x over e to the 6x over e to the 6x plus 1 over e to the 6x. And this is 1, this is 1, this, when e to the positive 6x, if you're going to positive infinity, this goes to 0, and this goes to 0. So what we're left with is the limit as x approaches infinity of 1 over 1, which is just 1. And that actually brings us to the end of this section. Hopefully these have all been helpful examples for you, and you're able to complete the homework and practice them yourself.